The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of WBBZ-TV. It's time for Political Buzz, the television forum to discuss politics and issues of interest for all of Western New York. Now, from the WBBZ television studio at the Eastern Hills Mall, this is Political Buzz.
Hello, everyone. John Sciullo with you here for another important edition of Political Buzz here on WBBZ TV. Gun control, the debate that has gripped the nation. But the reasons for the debate are not new. According to the FBI, 24 mass shootings occurred in the United States between 1984 and 2012, with 24 shooters ranging in age from 11 to 55, firing more than 1,500 rounds, killing hundreds of people. And in the city of Chicago last year, 228 people have been killed as the result of violent crime. But despite that alarming statistic, it was the tragic shooting of schoolchildren, teachers, and administrators December 14th in Newtown, Connecticut, that has prompted swift political response from the White House and here in New York. Just this week, the New York SAFE Act passed through the Assembly and the Senate, signed by Governor Andrew Cuomo into law, the Secure Ammunition and Firearms Enforcement Act, an initiative passionately introduced during the governor's State of the State.
I know that the issue of gun control is hard. I know it's political. I know it's controversial. But we are proposing today common sense measures. And I say to you, forget the extremists. It's simple. No one hunts with an assault rifle. No one needs 10 bullets to kill a deer. And too many innocent people have died already. End the madness now.
Here are some important points to know about this controversial law. It will expand background checks. Licenses must be renewed every 5 years. It bans ammunition magazines holding over 7 bullets, increases penalties with tougher prison sentences for gun crimes, including a Webster provision following the Christmas Eve tragedy near Rochester, where first responders were shot. And it requires mental health providers report on dangerous patients. Now, the text of this bill is available online at the Buzz section of WBBZ.TV. I posted it there for you to see. But is all of this necessary? Will it work? Some gun rights advocates think that the discussion about people who are mentally ill owning guns and background checks is a good one to have. But is the New York legislation and the president's just announced proposals to ban military-style assault weapons, mandate universal background checks, calling for more cops, restricting high-capacity ammunition magazines to 10 rounds, and asking lawmakers to weigh getting an A rating from the gun lobby versus what he says is doing right for the public? Is all of that an infringement on our Second Amendment rights, simply putting politicians and the mainstream media together in an emotional frenzy? Now, to discuss this important topic, we have our Democratic strategist and attorney from Underberg and Kessler, a regular here on Political Buzz, Steve Pigeon. Steve, welcome to our show. And the former Republican candidate for governor of the state of New York and president of Ellicott Development, another regular here on Political Buzz. Please welcome Carl Paladino.
Thanks, John.
All right, folks, I'm going to start, Carl, I'm going to start with perhaps your answer. If you were governor of the state of New York, would you have reacted just as Andrew Cuomo did?
Are you serious?
I'm asking.
No, I wouldn't have reacted as he did. I think it's his vanity that's important to him. It's his political aspirations that are important to him. With total disregard for the people of the state of New York, he presented our legislature with a certificate of necessity that there was some magic urgency for him to get a law passed that has absolutely no effect whatsoever on the criminal element in our state and will have no such effect. And that is so unfortunate, and it's so wrong that our legislature allows him to do it. The legislators that voted in favor of his bill, especially in the Senate, you've got Mark Grisanti and Tim Kennedy, were cowards for not standing up to him and for not facing them down and saying, no, this bill has to rest on the desk for 72 hours to give the press a chance to put it out to the people, because we here in the legislature are not endowed with all the knowledge, okay, that is necessary for us to absorb the impacts of this bill. And the people have a right to speak, and the people have a right to know what the heck we're passing. And we have a right to read a 40-page bill. At least read it. Don't give it to us 20 minutes beforehand, because I will guarantee you there is no legislator in the New York State legislature that can read 40 pages in 20 minutes. That's impossible.
Steve, do you think he rushed it through?
Well, of course, I respectfully disagree. I think those issues have been out there on the table for a long, long time. I think everything that was put into that bill has been discussed almost ad nauseum, both in this state and in the country. And I think the time to act is now, because what happens while people are still focused on that massacre of those children, that oftentimes in history you see that important legislation comes with a tide, like civil rights came after the Kennedy assassination. So I think the timing is now when people are focused on it. There wasn't one new thing in that bill that legislators...
process, Steve. We're talking about a process that should be followed by our legislature in adopting any type of legislation.
Well,
I'm not arguing with you about the specific substantive points of the bill. All right, that's for another day. But I'm talking right now about the process that was followed. A certificate of necessity. These people
Which is
don't
part
have,
of the process.
This is the way our government functions, and that's why we're so upside down in New York State. A governor threatens the New York State Senate and says that he will put it in the budget bill and pass it that way because they can't shut down state government if these guys don't vote on it today. What kind of baloney is that? What kind of way is that to govern? Where's the transparency?
Well, 48 senators voted for it, including many Republicans.
Listen to me. I don't think there are 48 senators, all right, that have half a brain over there. And you know it and I know it. We send these numb people who don't know what they're talking about, and they're all dealing with process, and you put a little bit of pressure on them. Anybody could put pressure on them. And all of a sudden you're passing bills which the public has some problem with, that they are very important to the public. And by the way, hunting has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. This guy, this bird that we have for a governor, all right, thinks that it's about hunting. It is not about hunting. It is about having that weapon, all right, because you're entitled to it under the Constitution of the United States of America, and not so you can go out hunting.
Steve, how do you respond to that?
Well, first off, I think that there was a hunter's society when that amendment was written, and Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the authors of the Constitution, said it needed to be rechecked every 20 years.
Is that why we have a militia?
And it regarded a well-regulated militia, and they had the words "regulated" in the amendment. So I think what we've seen in this Constitution is that it's elastic and that it does change with the times, and that's the way why it's been such a strong Constitution. And as a matter of fact,
I object to legislators who are as numb as our the people that vote from our delegation that voted for this bill. You got Robin Schimminger, Gabrajak, okay? These guys are numb. They don't understand in depth any of these issues. They don't understand what an assault weapon is. What did they do in that bill? They did one thing. They further restricted weapons in the hands of the good guys. They did nothing to do anything. They did nothing with the bad guys.
Why does a good guy need an assault? Military style.
I was in the Army. I trained troops.
Magazines. Why?
I trained troops for 11 years. I trained them how to shoot an M16. I enjoy shooting my AR-15. I really enjoy it.
So just for enjoyment. So we should risk people getting that gun that will kill children or kill mass
people getting the
by
gun?
Having that gun available.
We already
for your enjoyment.
We already had the most stringent
there's a restriction,
laws.
and all of the Constitution there's restricted. For instance, on the freedom of speech, we determined hundreds of years ago in this country that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater because of the freedom of speech. So the Constitution has always been open to reasonable restrictions. Mm-hmm. So because you enjoy shooting a mass killing weapon, So therefore, we should have it available so that other people that have other reasons for using it can do it. I think that maybe we should limit your enjoyment somewhat to a pistol and to a magazine that can't fire 100 rounds.
The woman in Connecticut went and bought the assault rifle.
And she's a prepper.
Bought the assault rifle.
She was a prepper. She was a prepper, and so she was a little off
with a mental
herself.
disease. What does any of this have to do with that case?
Because it was available. It was available to that mental person and a mother who was a little off, by the way.
Yeah.
It was so easily available in this society.
They shouldn't have sold the gun to her.
They should not have.
Right.
That's
but
right.
you don't go and take the assault weapons away from the good guys.
I don't see why anyone needs an assault weapon.
Gentlemen, before we do take that break, Carl, you had an important point that Steve pointed out we need to reiterate there.
Simply, if our government becomes tyrannical, the people don't have to suffer that tyranny in America. That was that tyranny that our forefathers were trying to protect the citizens in the future with when they said that the militia, which is the people, shall have the right to bear arms. With reasonable regulation, yes, of course. And we're all for reasonable regulation. But you don't take the weapons out of the hands, okay, of the good guys. You don't do that, because in history, the tyranny that people suffered was followed.
What you said, Carl, was when the revolution
of the people.
comes.
Right,
when the revolution comes.
When the people have to revolt against their government.
that believes that in a modern society, that this tyranny that the revolutionaries were talking about.
Beliefs.
You may think I have some strange beliefs, and some people might think you have some extreme strange beliefs. But I believe that we have the protections against the tyranny is in our democratic system. And the fact that the government is the people. But the militia they were talking about was not just the citizens. It was a regulated militia of each state, which then was turned into an army. And they were also talking about invasions from the Spanish or invasions from the Indian Wars. So it wasn't about necessarily a tyrannical government. And Jefferson said it needs to be looked at every 20 years. And there was a lot of regulations, like the Whiskey Rebellion on that. But I don't believe that I don't believe that there is this tyrannical government, this tyranny that's coming of the United States government to take over its people, that a lot of the preppers and a lot of the extreme right believes is coming.
We're going to meet a gentleman from S.C.O.P.E, from Western New York, gun rights advocate, talk about the NRA when we come back. You see how the Western New York delegation voted as we get back to the discussion on gun control. Now let's take a look at a brand new television spot, very powerful and controversial one from the NRA. Take a look.
Are the president's kids more important than yours? Then why is he skeptical about putting armed security in our schools when his kids are protected by armed guards at their school? Mr. Obama demands the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes, but he's just another elitist hypocrite when it comes to a fair share of security. Protection for their kids and gun-free zones for ours.
Very controversial new spot. We'll get some comment on that in just a little bit. But joining us now for our discussion on gun control is a founding member of S.C.O.P.E, Schroeder's Committee on Political Education. Would you please welcome Harold Budd Schroeder. Bud, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much.
Bud, welcome to the conversation with Carl and Steve. Let's talk about, maybe from a political standpoint, the power that the NRA has in influencing some of these lawmakers.
Well, it's very difficult to influence a bully like Cuomo. He's a bully, and it's just, that's his way. He bullied the legislature with the gay marriage bill, and he bullied him again here with the bill for the gun legislation. That's his way. He's an illusionist. He chooses to use these techniques to further his own political aspirations. The NRA is basically a non-consideration in New York because of the very strong Democratic hold that Cuomo and his fellows have on,
Well,
on the
first
state.
off, what I see coming out of Albany is strong leadership, and strong leadership that has been lacking for the last few governors. I see a person who passionately believes what many New Yorkers believe. I think if you polled this gun law, you're going to see that most New Yorkers agree with this. As a matter of fact, when you talk about the NRA involvement, most members of the NRA support an assault ban. Most of their actual members. And that's that. Bud's shaking his head, but I've seen the polls where most gun owners and most members of the NRA are supportive of the assault.
Well, Bud, what's your
ban
reaction
weapon.
to that? And then you'll tell us a little bit.
He makes
from
this
that
stuff up, Bud.
From that point of view, no, that's not made up, Carl. But from that point of view, the NRA is strong, especially in the suburban and the rural areas of New York.
What's your comment, Bud?
Well, my comment is, first of all, I am so glad to see my friend Carl here, and I'm glad I voted for you. Cuomo got in as a governor, and he turned out to be a dictator. He is forcing his views on him, wrong as they are. But I'd like to make a point here that I think is very important. In that Webster incident, you had a fellow that never should have gotten out of prison. I mean, he beat his grandmother to death with a hammer, and he got out after 18 years. He should have been in there for life without possibility of parole. That's number one. He was a felon. He could not legally possess any type of firearm, but he did. He got them illegally. He fired and shot 4 first responders, killing 2 of them. However, an off-duty cop who was fortunate enough to have a gun in his car with him neutralized that. And undoubtedly, he saved the lives of those 2 wounded ones, and Lord knows how many others that would have come behind to put out those fires. So Wayne LaPierre was absolutely correct that the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is to have a good guy with a gun.
So let's talk a little bit about that, Bud, for a second, because once again, another issue where an individual who had some mental incapacity was in receipt of a firearm and unfortunately used it for a very heinous act. Because you have no issue with the mental health, from what I can understand. You have no issue with the fact that people who are mentally ill should not have guns, and the fact that these background checks need to be.
Well, you're absolutely wrong on that.
Right.
I do have an issue with that.
What is that?
And I think that this part of the bill makes sense. That people who have mental disabilities should be treated and forbidden from having the guns the same way. Like if you have a professional, a health professional, that deems anybody that is a danger to himself or others, that person's data should go into the NICS check and they be prohibited from buying a gun. That is we gun owners, we don't want crazies walking around or running around with guns. We agree with that part of it. Good people have them, good people should be left alone.
Except that guns are so available in this society that it's very easy for mentally ill people to get the gun.
Particularly
Well,
if I understand at gun shows, you don't have to get a background check.
You don't
As
need a
presidents-
background check
Yes,
in New
you
York
do.
State, but in 40% of the sales in this country, in the United States of America, 40% of the sales, there is no background check. There's also no gun running legislation, gun trafficking legislation between the states. There's no federal legislation that prohibits that. So that states that don't have the tough laws can sell into, people can come in from those states with guns, and many people who are in gangs, these street gangs where the kids are killing kids, that's how they're getting gun. And straw purchases. There's no law against straw purchases, and that's happening.
Oh, yes, there is.
That's not throughout the United States.
Oh, yes,
Not
there is.
throughout the United States.
It's a federal law. Straw purchases are forbidden by federal law.
We need to strengthen this. We need to strengthen the straw purchase law, and I believe that one of the executive orders, I'm hoping that Obama is enforcing more laws that are on the book with what he talked about today. Is he did some executive orders to strengthen the laws that are already on the books, and I'm hoping that it's one of that straw legislation. But the point is, Bud, that it's too easy to get a gun in society.
All right,
now,
Steve.
I think the mental health is part of it. I think we need to look at these violent video games as part of it. I don't think it's just more gun laws that can stop this, and I don't think you're ever going to stop completely crazy persons from hurting people. But we don't have to make it as easy, and we don't have to make it as brutal with 100-round magazines.
All right, go ahead, Bud.
Well, Steve, actually, look at the math. Let's say that there are 70 million gun owners in the United States. You look at the number of gun owners and the number of people that abuse the right to keep and bear arms. And you will find out that it's 0.25% of those miscreants that are causing the problems. 0.25%. So we should be affected by the inability of the system to deal with that 0.25%. I think that's a completely wrong approach at it. And as for bans, if bans were effective, we wouldn't have a drug problem, would we? I mean, nobody can buy heroin, cocaine legally anywhere, right? Yet Cuomo thinks we should be able to have marijuana, but that's another story. Also, if bans worked, prohibition would have been the legislative success of the 20th century. Bans do not work. You got to work the system different. Taking my rights away from me is not going to make a better person out of a criminal. Do you agree on that?
Well, I agree on that, but I also I don't think you can compare an assault weapon ban with prohibition, because if you made the manufacture and distribution of assault weapons against the law, then it would be very, very difficult for someone to make an assault weapon in their basement. So I think, to me, it seems like common sense and reasonable that you don't need to have military-style weapon-killing machines available to the public. That should be available to armies. To me, it's just common sense.
Is there any?
And I think we need 100% background checks.
Let me.
And I think
ask
we
a question.
can't have all these different states having different regulations as part of the problem of being able to enforce it.
Steve, let me ask you a question. Do you think that only the military and police should have these type of guns?
I do, yes.
So that's one of the very best definitions of a police state that I can think of. So you believe that we should live in a police state?
No, I don't believe that we should live in a police state. But I think that those are weapons that only the Army should have when it comes to war. And I am not one that believes, like maybe you do, Carl, that we run the risk in a modern society of having this fascist-like government taking over here in the United States. If anything, with the internet and with the way modern society works, our best protection for the democracy is the whole of the way our government system works.
Gentlemen, I have to interrupt right there. When we come back, we're going to get some comments from the public from our Facebook page as our discussion on gun control continues. The discussion on gun control, I'm almost certain we're going to be discussing it more here on Political Buzz. It's going to be continuing across the state, across our country, and right here on WBBZ TV. Here are some Facebook comments that we got on our WBBZ page. WBBZ. Doug Haynes writes, "This law will not stop one bad guy." Donald Sam Wiener writes, "Time to move to Montana." Leah DeCenzo weighs in, "Someone has to start change, even if it is a daunting task." Some of the information that you'll hear about from S.C.O.P.E, linked for our guest from Budd Schroeder, those links are on the WBBZ.TV webpage. We ask you to like our Facebook page, join the conversation at Twitter, WBBZ TV. Gentlemen, we really don't, unfortunately, have enough time to continue it. I do want to thank you, Steve Pigeon, for joining us here on the show, Carl Paladino, Harold Budd Schroeder from S.C.O.P.E. We know that we'll be hearing more from you in the days and weeks to come as the great debate here on gun control nationally and here in New York State will continue. Thanks for joining us in Political Buzz. Our new time, Thursday nights at 7:30, Friday morning at 9 a.m., and Sunday morning at 10, right here on WBBZ TV.